Today we're going to talk about Piaget's mechanisms of learning and adaptation. Our goals for today's lesson are to think about Piaget's model of human thought, including his concepts of schema, knowledge structures, and then also the process of how schemas are acquired and modified through assimilation and accommodation. First, let's think a little bit about Jean-Claude Piaget as a person. He was a Swiss scientific prodigy who started out as a biologist. He studied animals such as birds and then later mollusks. It was only later in his professional life that he became interested in philosophy and psychology. As a result, his work in psychology is really influenced by his work in biology, and so his model of learning in many ways is really a cognitive analogy of adaptive change as it occurs and as it's viewed in biology. So if you think about what you learned in your biology course, especially about adaptive change, you'll see some real similarities between that process and his model of learning. So basically, in his model of learning, he proposed both what it is that people learned as well as how we learn and acquire new thoughts and concepts. So in this image, we have a phone screen with all of its apps. If you think about the apps as a collection of categories or concepts this sort of roughly conceptualizes what he's talking about. These categories or concepts, according to Piaget, are called schemas. We acquire and we modify our schemas throughout our lives. It's a process. In this process, it is about acquiring and modifying schemas that constitutes learning, according to Piaget. It's important to also understand that learning is not just a big collection of concepts or schemas, but that these schemas can relate to one another in various ways. Our brain tries to make sense of these schemas and actually organizes them mentally into knowledge structures that make sense. It's kind of like when you organize all of your apps into folders according to category. This folder system helps you save time and effort in retrieving the right app because the apps are organized in a complex structure that makes sense. Piaget made the case that children create cognitive structures that help them process and make use of complex human thought. Let's take a look at how one category or schema might develop. Let's take a look at the schema for lion. First, it's important to remember from our discussion of categorization and the acquisition of intercultural competence that it's in our interests as humans to construct categories or schemas, according to Piaget, quickly. Often we make these categories with very little evidence. On the other hand, it's also in our interest to have accurate categories. This means that we need to not only be good at and quick to construct categories or schemas, but we also have to be good at adjusting or modifying existing categories, or be good at making new ones for new things that no longer fit into our structures. Having this ability to form these categories quickly and then modify them or change them depending when we're faced with new information is what allows us to have the advantage of both being able to benefit from a category by constructing it quickly, but also adapting it so that it's most accurate. So his model proposes procedures for both of these sort of things. So anyway, back to our lion. If we look at this lion, you can see a lot of things about a lion, but there is one particular thing that we know, given our experience with lions, might not be exactly accurate. So anyway, let's imagine if this lion were the first one you ever encountered and you need to make a category. You may create a mental category of lion that might have these features that are listed on the screen. For a lion we could propose, based on this one experience with a lion, that lions have 4 legs, they have paws and claws, they have sharp teeth, they roar. Maybe they'll eat me if I've seen them eat others, things like that. So this concept or schema of lion is constructed of these associated features. But as you gain more experience in the world, let's say you encounter another lion that looks like this. Piaget argues that at this point you might experience some cognitive or mental discomfort. That is, you may become perplexed, maybe a little confused because you notice something about this lion that's different from the first lion that you saw. In this sense, cognitively, your equilibrium, your sense of, I got this, is disrupted. You realize maybe you don't know all there is to know about lions. This discomfort or loss of cognitive equilibrium motivates us to make adjustments to our categories or schemas in order to restore equilibrium, in order to come up with a schema that reflects our new knowledge about the concept. So, back to our lion. We now have two examples of lions, and we're feeling some disequilibrium because these two images or features lists that we've constructed don't exactly match. So now we recognize we need to modify our schema, our current schema, taking into consideration this new information. But it's hard to do with just two examples. We need some more experience with lions. So as we gather more information about lions and see that every lion we encounter except that first one actually has a tail, in our experience, we realize that there are so many lions that have tails that only this one doesn't. So this sort of pattern or preponderance of information about tails leads us to realize that, hey, maybe that first lion was not a normal lion, that in fact all lions probably have tails. So this sort of mental process takes place. And in this case, as we get more experience with lions, we decide that we need to add a new feature to our category or schema. In this case, restoring equilibrium is an easy task. We simply add or assimilate this new feature, has a tail, into our existing schema. This process is called assimilation. Some schema changes, though, are not so simple. You look at the evidence and you realize you can't just add or assimilate the new information into the existing schema. For example, we can't just say, oh yeah, some of the lions I've encountered have manes, and so therefore all lions have manes. This is not true in the case of manes, as it is with the tail. Yes, lots of lions have manes, but lots of them, probably more than half actually, do not. We can't simply assimilate this information into the existing feature structure or existing schema. We have to actually change the structure of the category in order to accommodate for this pattern of occurrence of manes in lions. According to Piaget, accommodation occurs when the learner has to change the structure of the schema in order to reestablish equilibrium. This kind of cognitive growth, obviously, is more difficult than simply assimilating new information. There's more cognitive discomfort when confronting this new challenging data, and there's more cognitive work involved in restructuring a concept. In this example, we're exploring a fairly simple schema, but throughout our lives we learn all kinds of things. Some concepts or schemas are fairly simple and straightforward, such as learning what a lion or a bear or a dog is. But other concepts and schemas are much more complex and must be acquired through successive rounds of confronting new information about the schema and assimilating and accommodating new elements into the schema as needed. Children, and adults too, are frequently learning new things, changing views and understandings, and as a result, our schemas are often in a state of change as well. According to Piaget, this growth and change of schemas is essentially learning. This model of learning is viewed as a cognitive model of learning because the thinking part of the brain must be engaged in order for learning to occur. It's up to the learner to recognize new information, experience this loss of equilibrium, and then go on to do the work of assimilation or accommodation to adjust the schema and restore equilibrium. Because this kind of learning requires learners' active mental engagement and thinking work, it's considered a cognitive model of learning. Compare this model to our exploration of conditioning, or the cue plus routine plus reward circuits we discussed earlier this semester. These behavioral models actually involve the brain turning off and executing these behaviors, routines, or emotional responses to cues automatically without a lot of thought or effort. Piaget's model of adaptation, however, is cognitive because it requires the thinking part of the brain to be on, to work, in order to learn and change.